For some of us, it's something akin to looking out over the street where you live for years, watching a pothole get bigger and bigger, seeing cars first bottoming out on it, then losing hubcaps before it, and then crashing and finally being swallowed whole inside it. And then one morning out of nowhere, 497 different repair crews show up at the same time, along with the mayor and the governor and like Richard Branson. Our third story in the countdown, fact or fiction, and Bill O'Reilly is in big trouble and seems to be desperately trying to tamp down what might be seismic gurglings beneath him, not unlike the ones that erupted into the Don Imus crisis of last spring. Mr. O'Reilly accused of racial insensitivity, quote, quite reprehensible remarks, according to a member of the National Black Chamber of Commerce, in a saga that has now transcended the normal avenues of Bill O criticism to merit coverage by the Associated Press, USA Today, a food critic blog from the New York Times, even CNN. The money quote, of course, you know. The full context in a moment. Couldn't get over the fact, O'Reilly told his audience, that there was no difference between Sylvia's restaurant and any other restaurant in New York City. I mean, it was exactly the same, even though it's run by blacks, primarily black patronship. The story was the centerpiece of CNN programming the last 2 days and got a few mentions on this network. With the perfect convenience of timing, in today's Boston Globe, Mr. O'Reilly explained that he has long since given up responding to criticism. Quoting him again, I learned my lesson with Al Franken a few years ago. Gutter snipes are inconsequential. The level of dishonesty in that realm is so dramatic now. These people are doing it for money, and I'm not going to play the game. Nobody is close to me at 8 p.m., and the rerun at 11 p.m. beats everybody. That's the rerun. Nobody's even in the ball game. Why would I bother with these people? Which would explain Bill's calm, rational, and dispassionate devoting of the first 2 segments of his comedy hour last night and the first 2 tonight to bothering with these people, in particular the ones at CNN.
Stunningly, CNN echoed the defamation on at least 3 of its programs. The reason CNN did this is because its ratings are abysmal. It is getting hammered by Fox News, so they're desperate for attention.
Exactly. Why would you bother with these people by giving them attention? The daily NBC references, of course, are complaints about Ali Larter from Heroes, no doubt. O'Reilly also tried to construct an I was taken out of context defense today, never addressing what he said on his broadcast tonight, nor getting the defense he expected from guest Al Sharpton, who instead said what he had read had disturbed him, but he had yet to hear the actual tape. O'Reilly merely again attacking those organizations which criticized him. Add ABC and CBS to the list tonight, and citing an unscientific online poll which his website has been directing users to all day as if it were a jury vote, though even it shows support from only 6 in 10 respondents. About context, O'Reilly insists this was all about a positive change in perceptions of African Americans compared to, say, the perception of his own maternal grandmother, who feared and hated them. O'Reilly did invoke his grandmother, but only after he had talked about how he couldn't get over the fact that Sylvia's restaurant was like any non-black owned restaurant. The context preceding the fateful anecdote was, in fact, a story that meandered from O.J. Simpson to something nearly as disturbing as that Sylvia's story.
I think black Americans are starting to think more and more for themselves, and they're getting away from the Sharptons and the Jacksons and the people trying to lead them into a race-based culture.
Sharpton, who's on a show tonight, and Jackson will be on a show tomorrow. Then came the story of Reverend Al and Sylvia's and MFers and Ice-T and Bill O'Reilly out to lunch.
You know, I was up in Harlem a few weeks ago, and I actually had dinner with Al Sharpton, who is a very, very interesting guy. You know, when Sharpton and I walked in, it was like big commotion and everything, but everybody was very nice. And I couldn't get over the fact that there was no difference between Sylvia's restaurant and any other restaurant in New York City. I mean, it was exactly the same, even though it's run by blacks, primarily black patronship. It was the same. This is what white America doesn't know, particularly people who don't have a lot of interaction with black Americans. They think that the culture is dominated by Twista, Ludacris, and Snoop Dogg.
Oh, and it's just so awful. It's just so awful because, I mean, it's literally the sewer come to the surface, and now people take it that the sewer is the whole
That's
story.
right. That's right.
Oh,
there wasn't one person in Sylvia's who was screaming, MFer, I want more iced tea.
So much for the exculpatory context. Let's turn now to Eugene Robinson, associate editor, columnist at the Washington Post, also member of the National Association of Black Journalists. Gene, good evening.
Hi, Keith. And let me warn you up front, even though I'm black, I'm going to speak standard English tonight. So I don't want you to be surprised or shocked. And I'm actually going to think for myself, too, which I know you'll be stunned. But I mean, this is incredible, but this is O'Reilly. This is the guy.
And it's textbook prejudice. I mean, he expected something because of the color of people's skin. It doesn't matter if he was pleasantly surprised or had his prejudice reinforced. Is this the most insidious part of this, that he doesn't know that is racism by definition?
Well, I'm not going to go inside Bill O'Reilly's head. Is he racist? What does he know? All I know is that it was at best a casually racist remark. But what really ticks me off is that when you say that, when you point that out, immediately you get charged by O'Reilly and cohorts with, you're the thought police, you're the thought Gestapo, you're the word Nazis, you're interfering with free speech and somehow cutting off an honest debate about race. Well, tell me what in the year 2007 is debatable about whether or not black people can use a knife and fork. I don't think that's debatable at this point.
Well, as to the attack part, he also defended NBC in the Today Show in the broadcast this evening and attacked CBS and ABC. So this is all a very fluid situation from his point of view. Any port in a storm, apparently. But let me play devil's advocate on one part of this. I keep thinking of Al Campanis, the baseball general manager, who 20 years ago on Jackie Robinson Day said black baseball figures did not have, in his terms, the necessities to be team managers or executives, and he helpfully pointed out, just as they could not swim, Campanis grew up in this xenophobic immigrant community in New York, and he grew way past it. He was Jackie Robinson's first double play partner in the minor leagues, his first friend. He went into management. He hired the first black talent scouts and minor league coaches in the 50s. He was an advocate, but he'd hit a wall that he didn't realize was there. I mean, are there similarities between him and the kind of O'Reilly prejudice where you may not mean something racist, but you're doing it anyway?
Well, I think, one key thing you just said was 20 years ago. Yeah. This was 1987. Look, Al Campanis, you could have sympathy for. He was, in many ways, a very sympathetic figure. Yeah, he hit a wall, but he genuinely didn't know it was there. He had grown up in a time where that sort of, casual racism was accepted, in polite society. And he was a baseball guy. Bill O'Reilly is a professional communicator who speaks to a couple of million people every night. You would think, he's aware of what's coming out of his mouth and how it sounds. And again, it's the year 2007. It's, we should have gotten beyond this point. But apparently, in that thicket that is Bill O'Reilly's mind, we're still there somehow, trying to figure out, black people, boy, they're starting to think for themselves now.
Would this have been tamped down with even one of those phony, if anybody took offense, I apologize, apologies, or was this like a tipping point waiting to happen, like the career of Don Imus?
Well, this isn't the first time that O'Reilly has walked this line, but he's not a really apologetic guy. No, that's not my impression, and I think that would not be true to who he is. So, what would you expect him to do other than to kind of, with his characteristic bluster, tough it out and say everybody else is wrong, I'm right, and I'm the victim of a vast left-wing conspiracy, of which I guess you and I are participants at the moment.
Well,
but
no,
there
maybe,
you have it.
Maybe not, because I'm with NBC and we're on the good list today. But I've got to ask you this last thing: if you're trying to kill the messenger, is there something? Is it tone deaf? Is it Freudian? Or is it just unintentional comic relief when O'Reilly says of the critics, particularly the one at CNN who accused him of racism, that they have now entered the dark side? I mean, what the hell is that?
That's really tone deaf, and that was the headline on the website item as well. At the very least, really, really clueless. And if you're going to have an honest debate about race, maybe you ought to educate yourself a little bit and think about it a little bit before you start mouthing off.
Eugene Robinson, columnist and associate editor with the Washington Post. Even under these circumstances, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
You too, Keith.